All right, we're back, and it's week 12, lesson 12 for this again. This is for COMP213 web interface design. Week 12, lesson 12, and I believe it's part 3. Let's just check this out where we are with our movies for this week. Yeah, it looks like it's part 3. So COMP213, lesson 12, part 3. And what we're doing is I want to talk about a couple things here. One of the things that we were talking about last day were this project. We're using this PowerPoint presentation, and last day we were talking about a couple of different things like video. Go ahead. Video. We were doing video, and we were doing audio, and we also used the CSS3 transition property as well as the CSS3 transform property. And I'll be putting those videos up by very shortly, probably by today if I can do it. So there's a couple of other things I want to talk about today. I want to talk about some of this image gallery stuff. I want to put together an image gallery, and I also want to put together how do I do a drop-down menu properly. How do I do it so that way it animates the drop-down menu? Okay, so we're going to talk about that a little bit. And I did cover that one of my classes, but I want to cover it so that everyone sees it right again. I also have another PowerPoint I want to talk to a little bit as well. I don't have a lot of time today to talk about this stuff, but I will try and talk about everything I can. Right? Remember that for those people who are on come on Mondays, this Monday is a holiday, so there's no classes. That's important, or else people will show up and maybe, I don't know, maybe you will show up, I don't know, maybe you won't. So here's something I want to show you. We talked about the last time about this web project idea, so this web project overview. And I wanted to mention it again because we keep talking about this idea of different phases. And for your final project, I want you to keep in mind some of these phases you're going to be part of. Now, you're not going to do all the phases because for your final project, you don't really have an engagement phase, right? Because I've already engaged you. You and I are married, right? Where you're going to take care of your, I've already given you the okay to run my little real estate program. That's what I want you to make, right? And there's no project closeout necessarily. There isn't none of this stuff, right? But one thing you will do is these other 3 phases here, the planning phase, the build phase, and the deployment phase, you'll be heavily involved in this stuff, right? So if you notice, I've kind of included this PowerPoint, which I'm going to put up on the web and put into eCentennial so you guys have access to it because you will be tested on it, right, in terms of web project phases. So again, there's this engagement or initiation phase, which is right here. And then what we talked about last time, I kind of drew it on the board, is this idea of this client interview. We have to understand the target audience, and we kind of put together, one of the deliverables is this proposal document that we want to kind of put out so people can see it. And then if the client agrees to your timelines and the cost, because you're going to kind of put up a quote in your proposal document, right? He gives you client approval, his initial deposit. Now again, we want to take at least 25% here, if we can. And then we move into the planning phase. So the planning phase, typically we have a kickoff meeting and so on. We talked about kind of this stuff before. But the 2 things that you need to worry about is your site structure or your mind map that you're going to make a site map with, and your wireframes. Those 2 things in the planning phase that you're going to kind of produce. Typically, though, we would do some market research, competitive analysis to see what the other people are doing out there, and so on. We kind of put up at least 3 or 4 design options, which include things like some site structure and wireframes. And then we have finally, when we decide on which 1 or 2 design options, we kind of produce mock-ups for those designs, right? We kind of create a project schedule, and then we produce a project brief that we give to the client saying, so here's what we're doing right now. This is our project brief. And what do you think? Are we good? And if we're good, the client approves everything, and we move on, we get the second deposit, right? Try to get as much as we can, right? Whatever it is. Typically, by this point, we at least have 50% of the money. We try and get this by the planning phase. This is good because we spend a lot of time. Planning takes quite a bit of hours to do. We haven't really built anything yet, though. So now we go into the build phase. We build out our templates, right? For example, for our HTML, different HTML pages, we use, especially if we're using some kind of templating engine. We create our database or set it up, migrate it, move it, all that kind of stuff into our development environment. We develop our code base. We start coding on the back end for different functionality. our models and our controllers and so on, all the things we need to use to create our pages. Finally, we create the views. This is our pages. These are the pages that the end user is going to see. And we add content to the pages that is provided typically by the user. We don't actually create content. Creation of content is a totally different project, like we mentioned before. And especially things like branding and all that kind of stuff. That's something that's separate from what we normally do with web design and development. We have our, we proof our content with the client. We say, hey, so this is what your page is going to look like. And we do a little bit of functionality testing at this point internally, and a little bit of usability testing. But we really don't have the final product. We just test we proof the content, saying, is this the content that's going in? Right? These pictures, let's confirm that these are the things that are going in, but to these pages and so on. We do a little, when we say proof with the client, we usually contact the client and say, okay, we got your content, this is the one, is there anything else you want? And we confirm, this might take a couple hours to do, we confirm different pages and what they're going to have. And then what we do is after our initial testing, we integrate some security aspects, and then finally we create this staging site that eventually the client's going to be looking at, that we can actually look and see, give them some updates on the staging site. At this stage, after we've got the build phase pretty much done, we haven't deployed yet, but we have a staging site that's fully working, right? We do another client approval where he says, yeah, this looks pretty good, right? We've done our initial testing, right? We get another deposit if we can, typically. Sometimes we can't at this stage. We move into deployment phase, and in the deployment phase, what we do is we migrate the database, right? We do your site migration, email integration, so make sure the email works, right? Then we launch the site. We start doing some quality testing and performance testing with the client and third-party testers. All they do is test the site, so nothing to do with us, so that there's impartiality when it comes to testing. No one's going to say, yeah, it looks good. Oh yeah, well, this doesn't really matter. It all matters, right? And for us to create proper testing, we want to farm it out to somebody else, almost like a beta test team that tests our site. And then what we do is we identify and prioritize any issues, something that doesn't work on the site. We refine the site, make it nicer, and we set up analytics to make sure that we can track site tracking and so on. We've already deployed it right now. The site's live, right? But we also do some fine-tuning with the client to make sure that everything is good. Once we have client approval that things look good, we move into project closeout, right? And this is where we do things like site promotion through marketing, email marketing, and so on, SEO, search engine optimization, social media linking, where we do things like linking with Twitter and LinkedIn and all that stuff. It really depends if the client wants that or not. If it's not something the client wants, this is the phase where we get that done, if he does want it. We also do training, right? So if we want to train the client on how his new application runs, we do a little bit of training and some tutorials about what has to happen, because they're going to have to understand all the piece parts to the website itself. We're going to also include client feedback, right? So client feedback, we're going to do a little bit of survey, say, hey, so how do we do? What could we have done better? And all that kind of stuff, right? And then hopefully we'll be able to get some more sales leads, right, from the client to get more work. This is the whole idea with it, right? We also perform a lessons learned, right, with our team to make sure to see how it worked. And from a continuous improvement loop, we want to be able to bring all the lessons we learned from this project to the next project. And then finally, we create a style guide that we give the client that has all the information we just got from all this stuff. This is where the deliverable happens. We also talk about some future planning with the client for any kind of enhancements in the future, things that they want to add now that they've seen the full site running, right? And we also discuss things like support and maintenance, monthly support. Do we give 30-day support? Usually it's like a 30-day free support for any kind of problems. And then after that, they're into support mode, and they pay for real-time support. If they want us to respond within a certain time, they pay us a certain amount of money. Once we have client approval that everything's good, then we get our final payment. And then we've closed out the project. So that's really it in a nutshell. I wanted to share that with you guys in kind of a typed format, so you've seen it. And again, we're going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about this in the exam. I'm also going to review this with you next week during our review week. Okay. All right. So we talked about that, the transition property and so on. And what I also did, just going to kind of pull up this document. Last time on GitHub, I've also stored my version for COMP213 lesson 12 part 1. This is 12. If you want to go there, this is the lesson that the part that I'm going to be continuing. I kind of started some other stuff off with our drop-down menu. So I'm going to try and hit drop-down menu right now and how to do that. Okay, so I'm just going to open up that lesson. And let's go right into that. So I'm going to go into lesson 12 part 1. Hopefully it's going to link nicely to GitHub. I don't want to have a problem. And let's make sure the Team Explorer is linked properly. It is. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so we've got some content here. I'm going to cut some of this down just so that way we don't need all these things here. So let me just go down to here. And we're going to save. And let's see what we've got so far. So last time we were together, we did this. Right? And when I kind of hover over, we kind of have this thing where we kind of zoom in and kind of come out. If you want a smooth transition on the way back out, how do I do that, right? Well, it's called transformer. And if I go to if I stop debugging, and if I go to my main.css on the bottom, right? So here we go all the way down to my main CSS. Here it is. If you notice, I'm hovering on my paragraph tag, but I really don't want to do this. What I want to do is I want to include all this inside my transformer object. Right, because that's what this thing is. My transformer is going to be the one I'm going to hover over, right? So how do I do that? Well, I'm going to kill these things right here. Just kill this. So this is part of instead of a p tag, it's part of my transformer object, right? And when this scales back out, right? So here's my transform. I do an ease in, right, for my transition, and I want to ease back out when I come back to it, right? So let me just move this from my p tag to my transformer object. So I'm just going to do one of these. Let's just see if this works. So one of those. So I want my div tag to transform. I don't want just my text and my paragraph tag to transform. One thing is, you know what I noticed? In other classes I did this. This 0.5 seconds is too long. I'm going to cut this down to 0.3 seconds here because I think that's a nicer time frame. And we're going to do an ease in and an ease out. I think so when I'm over my regular size, I'm going to ease out. And the same thing goes with all these to produce a different kind of effect. Right, it's just fixing up the stuff that we did last time, just so that we're all on the same page. And then update GitHub with some changes. And this one here is going to be an ease in, but it's only going to be 0.3 seconds. So the whole thing is going to take almost half a second, not the full second that it took me last time. So let's see if that worked. All right, so transform, we're going to rotate back, scale 1, all that stuff's going to be back to normal. And let's see if my transformer object works nicely now. So I'm going to save all and run this thing. And now what we have is, when I zoom in, it kind of zooms in. Oh, that's not right. Let's refresh. When I zoom in, it resumes in. When I zoom out, it pops back out. How come it pops out? So I kind of go in and I want to get that smooth transform going on. There it is. Almost worked. Oh, there we go. Oh, kind of works sometimes, but kind of works not. Doesn't work all the times. And the reason is because of the way we set up our object. Now what I want to do, so up here, I want to create a drop-down menu. Okay, so first, before we do that, I'm going to save. I'm going to go stop debugging, and I'm going to go into Team Explorer here and go to Changes. And I'm going to the things we changed is our main CSS and HTML. I'm going to say updated CSS and index.html page. Okay, commits, home, unsync commits, and sync. So we're all on the same page with this project, COMP213 lesson 12 part 1. Okay, I want to add in some drop-down. So remember how this works out from a drop-down menu perspective. Drop-down menus, when we do menus, here's something we're doing here. We've got our main content, right? And underneath our main content, we have all these list items. Take a look, right? List item 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, right? Well, I want to make it so that my second list item, link number 2, right, is actually a drop-down menu, right? I don't want it actually to go anywhere. So we need to do a couple things here. One thing is I want to get rid of some of this text, or the A tag. So let's get rid of the A tag here on link 2. Because I don't want it to actually link to anywhere. It's going to link it's going to produce a drop-down menu, right? Well, the way we do a drop-down menu is we do a nested list, right? So we create a nested list. This link text is going to be up here, right? Link 2. We're going to call this drop-down list, right? Drop-down menu. Actually, we'll call it drop-down menu. That's what it's going to say. And inside of our list item, right, this list item, we're going to do another unordered list like this. We're going to say unordered list, right? Inside the unordered list, we're going to include, let's say, 3 drop-down items, so times 3. And inside those list items, we're going to have an anchor tag. And the anchor tag is going to have an href value that's equal to pound key. And what it's going to say inside, it's going to say drop down item, right, number dollar. And number dollar is going to say 1, 2, 3 as an example. If I press tab to activate my shortcut, it gives me these 3 list items inside of my UL like this. Okay, so basically again, a drop-down menu then is unordered list. Here's the unordered list that includes another list inside of a list. Okay. Now, to be smart, I want to tag this unordered list, with a class that we're going to create called dropdown. Right. So in our dropdown class, we're going to be able to style this list item, this unordered list over here. Okay, and we're going to save. Let's look at it now. If we're going to look at it right now, if we're going to do a drop-down list, what does it look like? Right, well, it looks like this. It's massive, right? What we want to do is we want to say this. By default, when anything that has a class of drop-down, unless I hover over it, is hidden. All right, so I don't want to do that. So how do I create that? Right, so I want this drop-down list to go away. Right, I don't want to see this drop-down list unless I'm hovering over it. There's another problem too. My drop-down menu is not a link anymore, and I haven't styled it. So I got to restyle this drop-down menu. And the only way I can do this actually words drop-down menu in here is if I kind of tag it with a span tag. So I'm going to put a span tag. Here's something you can do. You can kind of highlight the whole thing, right-click, right, and then I can click surround with, and then I can HTML, and then I can scroll down to see if there's a span tag that I can surround it with, which there is, and I can do one of those. Right, surround with. Okay, now that I have a span tag, I can use a class to target this drop-down menu words. We say class is equal to nav text. We're going to call this nav text. Right? Because this drop-down menu isn't really there's no A tag anymore. There's no anchor tag. So we want to be able to target it and style it. All right, let's do these things. So I'm going to go back into my main.css, scroll all the way down, and I'm going to start adding some stuff in here. First of all, I want to make my drop-down. Here's my drop-down. Right, my drop-down by default, right, is going to be, first of all, I want to make it so that, let's take a look at it. I want to put a border around it so I can start seeing it. So I'm going to say border, and we'll make it so it's really thick. It's like 3 pixel, something like that. Solid green. Turn that solid green border on. Let's Control S to save, and let's see what that does when I go back into my site. So this menu here is going to be surrounded by green, right? Well, hey, what happened? How come I'm not seeing it? This drop down, right? Well, that's the thing we have to take a look at is, did we style it right? So I called this thing drop down, and when I index the HTML, it says drop down with this period. I got to take this drop down period away. It was my mistake. These are little things that you know, cause errors. Let's refresh now. There's my menu. That's what it looks like right now. So my UL is the one that's highlighted, right? So if you notice, my UL, the only way it comes up is if I hover over it. But my drop-down menu, this text up here, right, should be highlighted all the time. It should be white, like this one, right? So let me target that one before I move on. So I'm going to go to main CSS, and underneath that, actually above that, I'm going to put my nav text, the class that has nav text, and I'm going to change the color of the text to white, as we did above. Right? Now I'm going to save and refresh, and then there's my nav text. I can see it all the time now. Okay, but this is my drop-down menu. My drop-down menu is like this. Now, if I want to target my drop-down menu here, these items here, right? This one isn't a link. If you notice when I hover over this, I don't get a link. I get an arrow. But I hover over these are links. That's as it should be, right? So how do I hover over this, and then when I hover over this stuff, first of all, these things should be a drop-down, not side by side. So that means the list items, these list items here, inside of my UL, this UL here that's highlighted in green, should be up and down, not side to side, not inline. So let's change that first. So my drop-down, my border is green. Okay, good. Now I want to target my UL, or my list items are inside my drop-down. So any list items, I'm just going to target this here, drop-down. I have a class, the class of drop-down that has list items inside of it, right? Target those list items, right? Any list item that's inside my drop-down class. I want to have a display of block. Yeah, that's the first thing. And let's check that out. So let's refresh. Okay, that's cool, right? That's how it should look, right? The other thing is that when I drop down here, if you notice this whole thing is highlighted. I don't want that to happen. I also want my UL, this UL on our list here, this, which is the green square, to be black as a background. Right now there's no background color, right? So let's add a color to the background of this thing as black, just so that way we can stay the same. So I'm going to go back to my code, and my drop down itself, the UL, right, has a background color, right, of black, right? Because my actual color for my menu, if you look at my menu, which is right here, my nav, right, my background color is black, right? Okay, we're all the way to the bottom now. So that's cool. Let's see what changes that makes. I'm just going slow here because I want to make sure that when I hover over this thing, depending on the item, see now how it's going? It's better now. You couldn't tell before, but now my drop-down menu, now first of all, it's there, it's showing, right? Right now I want it to be hidden. When I hover over my drop-down menu item, my actual drop-down menu, then it shows this drop-down menu, this UL. So the easiest way to think about this is to take it away by using my display of my UL, the UL itself, right, is display none. Right, so I would do one of these. Display none. Right? Display none means don't render it at all. Here it is. Here's display none. Now, when I hover or link, when I hover over my UL, right, my item, this is cool, right? But this is not what I want. I don't want to hover over this item anymore, because let me show you what I'm talking about here. If I save it and refresh it, this is what it looks like now. Back to normal. So I have my drop-down menu. It kind of highlights like normal, but I can't. I'm hovering over this thing now. And this thing that I'm hovering over is not a link. It's a list item, just like these ones are, right? But this item here, this item is just, there's no anchor. It's just a list item that I'm hovering over. So when I hover this over this list item, that is contained within the drop-down class, then I want my UL to show, right? So how do I do that? Means this one. So my display is block, typically. And you know what? When I hover over it, when I go drop down, when my list item, the list item of the drop down is hovered over, well, I can't get to that. And I can't get to the drop down itself, but I can do something like this. I can say this: any unordered list that contains, right, the drop down Is it under a list? No, any list item. Is it list item or drop? No, let me take a look here before I confuse myself. My under list is the one with the drop down, right? But I want to hover over this list item. So any UL that's inside of a LI, right? And the UL with a drop down, UL with a class of drop down that's inside of a list item, right? I want the UL, when the list item is hovered over, this list item here, I want the UL to come up. So how do I do that? So I'm not going to hover over my UL anymore. My UL is hidden. It's not even here anymore. I'm going to hover over this list item, right? This list item is what I'm hovering over. When I hover over the list item, this one here, then I want my UL, the corresponding UL, to show up. Okay. So how do I do that? So it's very careful coding here. When I hover over the LI, I'm going to hover over an LI tag that contains, right, a UL with a drop down, with a class of drop down. See the selector? A little different, right? The list item, I'm hovering over the list item with a UL of drop down, right? So I'm targeting this list item, right? This list item when I'm hovering. I want to change my display. Now remember, my display for my drop-down list item is going to be changed to block. Right? Right now, my drop-down, my display is none, right? And I'm targeting my drop-down to display block. So I'll say display block. Okay. Let's see that. See if that works. Right? These are good things. Okay, but that's kind of weird, eh? It kind of just displays it in this little thing. And the reason why it's doing this is because I'm using my positioning is inline, right? It's the same. It's natural. It's static positioning. It's inside of my my drop down. But what I really want is for this drop down here to be under here, which means I got to take it out of its natural order. And when I do that, what am I doing? Absolute positioning. This is the first time I'm going to use absolute positioning. So let's see if I can do that. So I'm going to go in here and say this. In my drop down, which is my UL, the UL of my drop down, it's going to be position absolute. Right? That's the first thing I'm going to put in there. Position absolute. Okay. And right now, my display is none. We're going to change this in a second. Right? Right now I'm using display none, display block. Right? But let's see how that works. So I'm going to go back here, refresh. When I hover over, now I see my drop down on here. Look. Almost there. We're almost there, right? So I got my items, and I have my individual items here, no problem. But what I want is for this top of this thing right here, the top of my menu, to be underneath my item here, underneath down here. And also, take a look. I see a little bit of this paragraph that kind of flows on top of this menu. I don't want that. I want my menu to be on top of everything. So there's a couple of issues I want to take care of. So how do I take care of those things? Well, for my menu to be on top, let's just take care of that one easily. I want to use a Z index of something crazy like 5,000. Right? So there's no way that anything is going to be on top of me. My menu is always going to be on top, no matter what I look like. That's the first thing. So now when I go back, just changing that Z index and a refresh, and I hover over the menu is on top of everything else. Take a look, and nothing else activates because it's way up here. So I don't see this other thing activating anymore. Huh? This one. Say Z index 5,000. What I'm saying is, because every object is layered on the same layer, my Z index brings that layer up one, so it's layered on top of everything else, right? That's what this is doing, my Z index. Okay, now I want to push this thing down a little bit. So I'm going to say, and here's where we go here. I'm going to say top, from my top, I want to push it down, and I'm just going to put up a value of about 4.5 or 4.6 m's. 4.6 m's. Okay, let's check that out, see how that looks. A little bit better, huh? 4.6 m's. What do you think of that?
Looks better.
Looks better, right? Okay. Well, here's what I really want to do. I want to make it so that when I transition, or I want to make a transition now, so when I hover over it, I want to display block, but instead of displaying block, I want to make it so that it transitions to displays it. Now, if I make it so it goes from display none to display block, it's going to do one of these. It's going to pop open. Let's take a look. So I want to make a transition that when I'm hovering over it, so here's my hover, right? Here's my display block. I want to do a new transition. I'm going to use the same kind of idea here. So instead of my transition being on the transform, my transition is going to be on the display. Let's try this out. I'm going to say, so transition, right, on the display, right? I want to make it so that it's like, 0.3 seconds. And we're going to say it's going to be an ease out, or ease in. Let's use an ease in. There we go. And for that, here we go. This is what it looks like. I want to copy this a bunch of times. So if you notice, I hover over transition. It says you need Moz, Opera, and WebKit. All right. So let's kind of copy those 3 times. Copy, and then paste, paste, paste. So Moz, Opera, and WebKit. There we go. Bunch of transitions there. And there's my transition, which is going to do my my transition from block. So when I go from 0, from it being display none to block, right? It's going to go nice and so it's going to slowly display it over a 3 seconds interval. Let's see how this looks. It's going to look weird. All right, let's refresh, and now I'll hover over, and I have nothing. It just goes pam. Doesn't do anything. Why? Well, this is a weird thing, but because I'm making it so it appears like this, right? I can't target certain things. See, I'm targeting my display. I'm trying to target my display property, and that's what things have changed. This display object that's changing, but I can't really do that. So instead of display none, if I want to transform stuff, I can't make things appear. I could make it so that the width or the height is collapsed when I first see it. My height then, here's my height. If I make my height 0, right? The height of the object goes boom, it's 0, right? If I do that and I change my height object here, my height, right, to auto, let's just see that happening, right? So I'm not just making it disappear. I want to make it appear. Now if I change my height value, here's my height value, right? Here it is. Oops. Instead of my display property, I want to target my height property for my transition. So when I hover over, my height property changes back to auto. Let's see what happens, if that makes sense. If I refresh, first of all, see that line there?
Yeah.
That's my border. And it doesn't really do anything, right? So I can't really hover in and out. It's there, but it's not showing me my border isn't appearing the way I like it. All right, and a height of auto, that's kind of annoying as well. We have to go back and fix that. Okay, so I got my transition. I'm targeting my height as an example because that's the thing that's changing, my height value, right? My height's 0, my height goes to auto. What if I went, so if my height is 100%, what does that do? This is weird too. Some people have done this before, so they thought this is 0, meaning it's 0%. You'd be forgiven to think that that's true. Let's check out and see what this does. Refresh, height of 100%. That's what this means. Now look what it did. It did animate. See how it did that? It kind of animated down, right? So I think I need a value there, but I don't need 100%. Well, we may have to decide what the height is. We're going to play with that height. but definitely height of auto, not cool, right? Can't be normal, right? And what other options do we have for height? If we actually go into one of these, height, we have auto and unset, right? Unset. So if I go unset, let's see what unset the height is, what unset the height will do. Just curious, right? Because that's, we're going to see some default properties with our IntelliSense here. Refresh, we go here and bap, nothing. Doesn't do anything, just unsets the height. So we get it back. It kind of does the same effect as auto, right? If I actually set a number, like I know, for example, I have 3 things I'm showing, I'm probably going to need a height of about 4 or 5 ems. Let's say 5 ems. So we say 5 ems. Just for a second. We may have to adjust this height in a second. So here's my fixed height of 5 ems. And then if I refresh, when I go back, that's not quite enough. And if you notice, this part over here shows up because I don't have really a width property. See, it's dropped down 1. I'm not kind of wide enough yet, and I have to kind of change that up. I will. Right? My drop down 1 is pretty wide, but this does what I want it to do, right? But 5 ems doesn't seem to be enough. I need more, and I need to be a little bit wider, right? So how do I fix this? So one thing I know to do is I know that my drop down probably needs some kind of overflow value. So let's go overflow auto. I don't want these scroll bars to appear, right? So add an overflow auto in here. And let us refresh and see what we get with that one. Okay, not really much of a change. I don't see a change here at all with this list item, right? I want to make it so that it's wider, right? So, because right now my drop-down menu just encompasses the list item itself. But it's not quite wide enough yet. So it has to be a little bit wider. So how do I know how wide it's going to be? The way to figure this out is to look at the list item itself and see if that's overflowing. So let's put a little box around the list item just to test it. So here's our drop-down list item. And let's put a border to see what's going on here of, let's use, again, 3 pixel solid blue, just so we see a difference in the border. All right, and let's refresh and go back and refresh this one. And now let's see what we have. There's our list item. See how the list item is there? And if we actually scroll down here, we have other list items that are in blue, right? Now we haven't mentioned the width of this thing, right? I haven't mentioned the width of that at all. It's just supposed to wrap automatically, right? Well, it doesn't do that. So overflow auto didn't do anything for us. This doesn't do, we can get rid of overflow auto. What's screwing me up, right, there's a couple things. One is my display. My display is block. If I was to display inline block, right, what does this do? If I go inline block like this. Let's refresh this one. This. Well, that's not what I want, right? It's trying to fit everything in, right? It does do a little bit of a drop down. Look at that collapse. It goes whoop, kind of opens up like that because that's my transition. So this is kind of what I want to do, right? Where I kind of have this thing. And look at the separation. I got a bit of separation here between those list items. I don't have a lot of, I got borders because all my list items have a border and this quality, and it kind of tries to fit everything in here. This UL itself, the UL itself has a bit of, looks like padding. Look at this padding that's going on here. Where the hell is that coming from? I didn't program any padding in here, right? Well, actually I did. I programmed the padding for all ULs with all nav ULs, right? This is the problem when we start doing this kind of stuff. I start doing all this stuff right here. I said my border is 1 pixel solid white for my UL, right? This is inside of my BDS screen, but inside my nav UL, I did a couple things here. I've got just the nav, just my nav UL. Any UL that's inside my nav has an overflow of auto and a text-align right. That's the first thing that I see. That's what's going on here. It's inheriting that value, right? And I also have a padding for my list items of about 15 pixels, which is just massive, right? It's big. Padding of my nav items of 15 pixels. I should change this, but I won't. I'm going to leave it as is. I've also got some other things that I've inherited. So Remember, it's a cascade. This is way down here on the list. So if I want to change my list items and I want to change my padding or whatever for my list items, which I do, right, by the way, I have to specify it. I have to be explicit here. For this drop-down list items, right, and this is for my UL. My UL, you know, it's got all that stuff going on already. So inline block, definitely not. I don't want to do that, right? And if I want to drop down, I want to increase the size of my list items, I can certainly do that, right? I can say my list items are a certain width. I can say my width of my list items. If I go width auto, what does that do? Should shrink wrap what I got. Let's see if that works. So width auto for my drop down list, right? And refresh, and move in there. I still got that issue, right? Doesn't really do much there for me. And maybe what I need is to specify width. What if I said my width now is like, I don't know, 5 ems. I'm going to use 5 ems. That's just a number. So I've specified a width now for my drop-down list. Right? What happens? So my width now changes, right? To this is pretty small, 5 ems, right? That's not what I want, 5 ems. I want it much larger than that. So maybe it's 10 ems. My width is 10 ems. Follow me here into this craziness. There it is. My width is 10 ems, almost. It's going to be like 12 ems or something like that. Right now, I can't do this every time, right? Because that's like crazy. What am I, if I'm specifying the width for every drop-down list that's at least 12 ems? That's kind of big, right? And look, it keeps on giving me these scroll bars, right? My scroll bars are appearing on my unordered list. I don't want that. I don't want my scroll bars to be there at all, right? That's kind of weird. Also, I've also specified a height of 5 ems, and that's not correct, right? So even if I went to a larger width, if I go to like, I don't know, 20 ems, my width. Let's check this out. I'll show you what I'm talking about. It won't matter. It won't matter if I do this. 20 ems, width 20 ems. Watch. And why is this happening? I'll show you. Because and it still does the scroll bars. Because I've pushed it over to the right, number 1, and I have my overflow as auto. Now let's add more width or height to this thing. So instead of 5 ems, let's make this my drop down at least 20 ems, right? 20 ems. Let's see what happens there. Fresh and drop down. I know that's good, but it's way more items than I need. I want to be able to match up the number of items. So however many items I have, I want it to drop down. I don't want to drop down all this extra stuff. And look at the scroll bars went away, so I can kind of scroll back, you know, kind of head back down this way again. This kind of stuff that I can do, right? Okay, if I don't specify these things, going back, let's show me. I'll show you what I'm talking about. If I go to a height of auto, this is what I really want, and I don't have to specify a width now. Go back to a width of auto, so I want to kind of specify this. If I want to change my list items, my padding for my list items, so I go padding, instead of 15 pixels, I want to go 1% or something like that. I could actually do that as well. I can specify that for all list items in a drop-down. Padding is changed. And let's see what happens there. So refresh.
So you remove the width and put padding.
Well, I did. I put my padding is 1%. Take a look. So my padding is 1% around, right? But see how this is not, now this is hugging? It's not enough, right? I'm trying to send it to the right, and there's just not enough room for this thing. So if I want to make this so it doesn't do that, doesn't split over 2 lines, right? I could increase my padding. Now if I go padding 2%, right? Let's see what that does. It doesn't do anything. So I could change my padding. If I took this property away, my padding goes back to 15 pixels, which is the default property that I set up there above. Watch. See, it fits. That's what this does. So this is where this thing goes, but it just pops up like this. It doesn't scroll in. Right? This is a problem. Part of it is because of the fact that I'm using a block element as opposed to something like a what I want to do is float left. I can also float left with my items as well instead of making them block. So I can go, instead of block inline, like, because right now my block was inline, if I go display for my items, what are the options? Compact, grid, inline, right? List item, that's not right. None, display none, I don't want to see anything. And then there's other ones here. There's table, unset. I don't want to display my thing at all, right? I want to change my display whatsoever. I want to make it the default, right? I could do that as well, right? If I do that, if I say display unset, right, like this, for my list items, what does it do? I'm just curious. I'm just showing you what all these functions do. So refresh, and I go down here, and now you see that everything's kind of bundled, one on top of the other. If I don't put display block, it does this. Let's go back. Okay, so I'm back to normal with this thing here. What I want to do is I want to take this transition, because I'm transitioning the height. So when I close this thing up again, go back here, I want my transition for the height to ease in as well. So because I'm specifying my height is 0, right? So let's see if I can do that. So I go back here, and go back to my website and refresh. And when I do this and I come back, it should transition down to 0. That's what I want it to do. Now, it's not because of my height property. There's no height. The height is auto right now. It's coming back to normal. It's wrapping, right, if you will. Okay, I also don't want this line to be here. This line is really annoying me. This tells me that it's actually physically there. I don't want my object to be physically there. I'll get rid of my borders too, but the problem is that I know my object is physically there. This green line is telling me that. So the way to do that would be to send it, when it's on my drop-down, normal drop-down, I want to put my left position, right, to a minus 5,000. What this does is it spirals it to the left, way to the left. I can put 10,000. Sometimes 5,000 is not enough. But what this does is it removes it from the screen, somewhere off the screen. Let's take a look and see that when that happens. So here I am. I see it. And now when I refresh, it's gone completely. When I come back, it doesn't come back because I have to bring it back to where it's supposed to be, right? So here's my left, right? And that's another thing. My drop down is here. My position is absolute. But when I hover over, this is where I'm going to go back to. My position is absolute, right? But my left, right, is got to be. Now there's two ways I can do this. I can go if I put left auto, right, auto, back to where it was. Where is it going to go? Let's refresh and see. Left auto, eh? Back to where it was. Look. See? Now it appears like this. I want it to transition up to this. And this is where we get a little bit funky with this kind of stuff, right? And I'll tell you why. First of all, I want my left position not to be auto for my desktop, but I want it to go to the left, right, at least, 1M, right? So negative 1M. So let's try this out. So I want to say left, right, and I want to go negative 1M. Let's see how that works. And refresh. Let's try that out. Well, there it is. There's negative 1M way over there, right? Because I'm specifying a value. I got to specify a value relative to my entire page, not to my thing. So once I go here, boom, it kind of goes over there. But I want it to go over here, right, where my drop-down menu is. So I could do it so that I've measured it. But the problem is when I do one of these, and I go back over here, and I hover over it, and I hover over this. This is okay, it works. But the thing is, when I'm over here, if I kind of go in here, it's still over there, right? Way over there, minus 1M. So that doesn't work. Can't do that. So let's go back and take this left off and put it back to auto. Right, so Again, I'm putting it back. So the transition is not really working, and the reason why we know is because my height property, which is coming from 0, right, here's my 0 height property, back up to 100% pretty much, right? That's an issue. Let me see what other options I have for height. I have height is auto or unset. I could also go to 100 pixels or some kind of pixel height if I want, right? Or something else. And I'm changing the drop-down list height. The whole drop-down list is going to be the height of my objects. Right? So really the transition is useless. I could put it in there, and for some advanced design layouts, they put the transition in specifically for each drop-down. So each drop-down you're targeting, and you change the transition and the position relative to the drop-down. But for now, for us, we're going to take it out because we know how to make it work. But right now we're going to take it out because it doesn't do anything for us. Okay. We're also going to do a couple things. I want my list items to be in, list this border under my list item, but I don't want it to be 3 pixels solid blue. Let's make it 1 pixel solid white. Right? I want a 1 pixel solid white border. And this pixel, this border can go away. This border that I'm using right now for the green, that can go away. And let's take a look and see what that looks like now. Refresh, and come back in, and refresh, and drop down, and now it looks like a neat little border, a little drop-down menu. Okay, this takes care of it for this one, but one of the problems I'm having is when I kind of go into my this list that I want to go into mobile, it does this kind of overlays, right? I don't want this to happen. In my drop-down, I don't want it to do any of that stuff that I just did. So I'm not going to do it here, but what I would have to do is when I go into my, so it's just from a time perspective, we're going to run out of time for all the things I want to do. If I want to show my menu differently in my drop-down, where I have my media query here, here's my media query. I've got to target my nav, my drop-down, so that it works differently when I'm in smaller screen size, right? And the way I can do that, of course, is I can grab my my drop-down, all this stuff here, and there is no hover effect. I don't have a hover effect for my drop-down, right, at all, when I'm in that size. I do want this stuff, right? But this hover effect I won't need, and this absolute positioning I won't need. So I'm going to copy all this. I'm going to go back over here into my media query, right? And inside my media query, nested inside, near the bottom. This is the end of my media query, by the way. Let's put that in there. End of media query. I'm going to just put it in there. So here's my drop-down list, right? And it's going to say absolute, but I don't want it to be absolute in my media query. I want to take the positioning away, my left away, my top away, all this stuff here. It's going to go, right? I also want to keep the background black. My height's not going to be 0, and my index is not going to be 5,000. So I don't care about that, right? Here's my list item, 1 pixel solid white. I like that, and my display is block, right? Just like it would normally be for my drop-down. Okay, let's see how the effect that has. So only for my when I'm in mobile mode, right? So when I want to make it responsive, so when I'm in mobile mode, only then does this drop down going to appear a little bit differently. Let's see how that works. Refresh, go back, and refresh this, go back to here, and now here I work nicely. When I'm in my drop down mode in my menu, I want to go here. When I click onto it, and I go to my drop down. Well, that didn't work. That did a pop-up. Let me see, did I refresh properly? Yeah, that shouldn't work. That shouldn't work at all, right? Only in drop-down mode, right? Should it do the other stuff. Now the reason why this is happening, why is this happening? Because of the positioning of my media query relative to my drop-down menu. So if I want not to function that way, my transformer is okay there because I'm not touching that, but this nav text and drop-down menu and all this stuff is going to be before my media query. So I'm going to take this out, or I can surround it with another media query. I'm going to grab this, take us all out over here, and put it before my media query. which is up here, underneath my contact label, right? Because now it'll be overwritten. Otherwise, I'm overriding it again for everything. All right, let's check this out. So media queries are important in the positioning of, because just like it's a cascade, right? So it's the same thing as before. So let's refresh this one and see what happens now. So I drop down, everything's okay. When I go to my media query, right, when I'm into this part, drop down and click over it. Oh man, what's going on? How come it's still doing that? Well, because a couple of things. This popped down. I'm displaying block, right? It's not absolute positioning. That's good, right? But there's something else that I've done here that makes it different, that does this pop up right here. It shouldn't pop up like that. It should be part of my media query. All right, let's see how that works. So here's my drop-down LI. And what I'm doing is I'm saying, normally, right? Did I miss my link text? My nav text, yeah. I put that up there too. Just because that's part of it, right? There we go. Okay. So I'm saying all this, black, color, height, and all this kind of stuff, height of 0. I'm going to go to my drop-down list item with a block, solid white block of white, and a display block, right? And again, do I want to specify that there? My hover, I don't have a hover effect. Here's my hover effect, drop down, my position is absolute for my UL and my drop down. And I have a hover effect, right? But I don't have a hover effect for my media query. I don't want to have a hover effect at all, but I do somehow. My LI hover, UL drop down, right, has to be specified. So I'm going to go in here, and again, I'm going to go to, I don't want to have a hover, right? So here I go here. So when I hover, I don't want to change my height or my absolute or anything like that. This is the problem. I have to turn this off. My position cannot be absolute, right? My position is static. And my left and my height and everything else is the same, because I don't care about those things. And let's see what this does when I hover over my drop down. I shouldn't do anything, right? Fresh, better. That's what it should be. See? So it still does something, right? My hover is hidden. This stuff is hidden, and my UL is hidden. Hold on. It should never be hidden. It should always be shown like this. So I should be able to see this. So this is what my items should look like when I'm hovering over, right? Okay, how do I do that? I'm getting closer, right? So my nav UL LI is block. My drop down, if I go back to my stuff outside of my things here, my drop down, my height is 0, right? My height is 0. And my height for my drop down can't be 0. My height for my drop down, because I have to reprogram it, right? I can't just leave it as a height of 0, right? My height for my drop down has to be regular. So I have to unspecify the height. I got to say my height then, when I'm in media query mode, is auto, always. My height is auto. Let's see that now. Refresh. Refresh. Shouldn't have to hover there for my height to be auto, right? My height should be the same height as normal, right? So, because right now what I have is my drop down is 4.6 ems, my left is minus 5,000, all this kind of stuff, and my nav text is white, my drop down LI is 1 pixel solid white, my display is block, all this stuff is normal, and except for my position should be static, and my height should be auto, right? Height should be always auto for my thing. In fact, my hover effect that's coming on is creating that thing. I shouldn't have to hover at all. It should always be showing, right? So my drop down not just this, my height should be auto. My height should be, everything should be showing all the time. I shouldn't have a hover at all. Right? My position shouldn't be static. There should be nothing inside of there whatsoever. So we'll talk about that another day. And let's stop this movie, and we'll get back to the CSS image gallery after.